alive! It's alive! It's alive! It's alive!
Hello and welcome to A Live After Reading. I'm Tim Niederreiter, and with me today is a guest who's new to the show, VK Tritschler. Welcome to the show.
Hey, welcome.
Almost screwed up the name. Almost screwed it up.
Yeah, almost, but so, yeah, no, you know.
Or just barely screwed it up. I don't know which it was. Anyway, so welcome to the show. Tell the listeners a little bit about yourself and your works.
Okay, so I'm based in South Australia. I'm originally a New Zealander / Canadian. My father's family's all from Canada, and my mother's side's all from New Zealand. We moved over here about 5 years ago, and we'd moved post Christchurch earthquakes. So one of my goals when we moved here was to do a little kind of bucket list thing, stuff we'd always wanted to, hadn't got around to, and one of mine was write a book. And since then, I'm now, 4 books in. I've got another couple coming out this next year. And loving it. I should have done it years ago. It's one of those hindsight things. If you'd known beforehand, you probably would have started earlier. So,
yes. Yeah. Definitely. Yeah. So, yeah. What are they about, though? What's your book, your latest book, say?
So the latest book I've got out is Trade Secrets. It's a rom-com. It's based in Adelaide. It's a little bit kind of like Emily in Paris. So it's a young girl new to the working environment, gets into this big job in advertising, and she's all excited. And then she goes and she meets the people she has to work with, and a little bit of that idealism gets shattered in that first meeting, which I quite like the idea of, take the machine off the job a little bit. And she gets into this position where her boss, bless him, he's not very PC. And it's interesting when I give feedback from the readers, there's a real love and hate dichotomy sitting there. Some of them absolutely adore him and think he's wonderful. Others think he's terrible. But anyway, so she gets in with this boss who manages to persuade her that she needs to spy on an alternative agency because they're both vying for the same contract. And she has caught the eye of one of the handsome guys that works at the other agency. So it's a little bit funny. It's a little bit awkward. There's a love triangle in there as she finds out, where she sits in the world and what happens from there really is about her growth and development. But I had a lot of fun writing it. It was a fun one to write.
Oh, it sounds interesting, and it's a comedy. That's interesting. Well, I'll put a pin in that. Well, you can go on. Are all your books comedies? I guess is the next question.
No.
Okay.
No, I'm a terrible genre masher. So, yeah, it's a plague. I apologize profusely.
No, I'm the same way, actually. I'm awful. I mean, I match different genres probably, but I still do it. I do it all the time, kind of compulsively.
Yeah. I try to stick in a narrow lane, but it just doesn't work. So the one I wrote before that was based on the area where I live now, because I really wanted to kind of show that one and show what it was like moving to small town Australia and that rural sector feel to it. But that's a romantic suspense, so that gets a little bit more cliffhanger. She gets kidnapped, so we wanted to get a bit of edge on that one. And then the one before it is a paranormal romance. So it's I loved the concept of just having that all religions were correct, but only a piece of the story comes from each religion. So it's a parallel universe one that plays on that concept that everything sits in these parallel worlds, and that the lead MC in it, she can jump between these different universes and what that means and the flow-on effect. And that's the first part of that series. I've got another book for that one coming out in February next year, which is the second book in that series. But I really enjoy that one because there's no limits. Your imagination can go wild. You can make anything you want out of that. So yeah, that was quite fun. So yeah, I do jump around genres a little bit. I mash them in a little bit. Some parts of them have comedic elements. Other parts are a lot more serious. I like that play on character growth and being able to show how the character starts to how they end up towards the end of the book. Yeah, so that's where I'm heading. The next one I've got coming out is another paranormal romance. I'd heard a rumor that they had big cats in Australia, like as in panthers that had got released, and there was a whole story about it, about them being released from like a circus or something. It was really random. And so they have all these random sightings of big cats. And I thought, wouldn't that be really cool to turn that into a paranormal romance? So I've made my MC a werepanther. And yeah, having lots of fun with that. So.
Oh, cool. Yeah. Those all sound really interesting. And I mean, I mostly write sci-fi and fantasy, but well, actually pretty much exclusively, but all mixed up together in different subgenres and stuff.
Sure.
Anyway, just so you know, but I gotta say that for similar reasons to why the paranormal romance where you can do just anything. It feels like you got all this possibility with the fantasy side, basically. That's what I really like about the stuff some of the stuff I write. But but to go back to you, I gotta say the whole parallel universe thing stuck in my head for a second. Those have so much possibility and. Mm-hmm. Honestly, I'm not sure if I have a question, but I just gotta say that's always so cool.
Well, I like the idea or the concept that because when you read religious texts, obviously there's lots of talk about the afterlife and what happens when you die and where you go and the consequences, etc. And all religions have that, but they all have like a slant or variant on how that works. And I thought, well, what if you grabbed just a piece of each of them and then you could, tie it all together, and that's what actually happens. So the premise behind the abilities that she has is that there's two energy forces within the universe. There's a good side and a bad side, which feeds into that yin and yang concept. And then those energy, the people born of that energy are able to either, when they die, they're either able to pass back into another universe in entirety, so that energy gets reabsorbed and then placed back in a new universe, or sometimes their energy gets stuck in a universe for whatever reason. That's why we have spirits and ghosts, etc. And then in her case, she's one of the rare breeds, as it were, that's able to manifest her energy across different universes. So she can actually, while she's still alive, move between worlds. So I really like that idea and having a play of, I guess, reincarnation and, all these kind of snippets of religious concept built into an overarching reality for this character. So.
Yeah, it's very, very interesting. It also reminds me a little bit. I mean, it sounds like your concept's a lot different, but it's not. But from this one, but I really liked when I was a kid. I remember reading the Chronicles of Crestomancy by Diana Wynne Jones. Okay, and that one, the main character was. I may have mentioned this on the show recently, so sorry, listeners, if you're going to hear it again. I do too many podcasts lately, but. The Diana Wynne Jones, the series is it's like there's like 9 realities or 9 different worlds basically, and each person there's a version of each person in each of these worlds, except for the wizards, like the Crestomancy. There's only one of this person, the Archmage kind of character, but then because there's only one of him or her, that character has 9 lives. So they can die up to 9 times before they actually die. They're just all compressed into one person, basically. All their realities are in one body. And right. That was really interesting. And it sounds kind of, I mean, again, not really similar, but parallel a little bit to the way, it's like, okay, so you can walk between worlds, see all these crazy different versions of reality, basically different places and stuff. Yeah. Sounds
yeah.
yeah.
So yeah, and I like the idea of playing with like deja vu as well. Like if your energy meets an energy you've met before in a parallel universe, and they identify, but you don't know the new person per se. You just know that you know of them.
Yes.
So like, being able to have a bit of a play with that. And really that concept of again, what happens after you die? Where do you go? What does it look like? And to be able to have like an infinite array of what it looks like, and where you end up, and sometimes it's randomly selected, and sometimes it's specific, and you get to choose. And I think it's quite fun to have a bit of a play with that idea.
Yeah. So to switch gears for a second, though, it just got me thinking about, because you have a lot of different, you obviously have a lot of variety to the work you're creating. So, but do you have a kind of similar process for actually writing all this stuff, or does the process vary?
No, largely it stays the same. And I'll be completely honest, when I write, I'm a bit of a pantser because I like I visualize as I write, and I write really fast, but sometimes my imagination goes faster than my writing as well. So occasionally I'll, visualize something, and then I'll wake up in the middle of the night and go, oh, I completely forgot to add that in. And I have to go back in and add in like a whole scene that I'd seen that I completely forgot about. But yeah, I write really quickly, and I write over a very short period of time, and then I go back and I re-edit in to fill in the gaps. Because for me, it's like watching a movie in my head. Like I see it playing out. I don't tend to plot out huge amounts of it. I grab the concept that I'm wanting to run with, and then I just wait and see what happens. And sometimes as I'm writing, even my characters surprise me. They come up with stuff that even I'm sitting there going, wow, I didn't see that one happening. So that's quite fun. Like I quite enjoy that, being able to just sort of free write and see where it takes you.
Yeah, I also discovery write. That's how I refer to it anyway. I don't really like the term pantser, but I mean I understand what it means.
Yeah, sure.
I just kind of go with the flow usually when I'm writing. Kind of similar to what you just described, honestly. I was like, I want the concept, and then I want to just take off and see where it goes, see where that leads.
Yes. Yeah. Dive into the rabbit hole. Yeah.
But I thought it was interesting how you was like, you have to admit you're not a plotter, basically. You don't. And I thought that was funny because I've heard that from other people who are like, they're kind of ashamed. And I know there's like this whole author, like the author community culture. There's a lot of people out there who are like kind of, I mean, maybe, I don't know. I don't actually have a lot of these people in my circles because I try to cut them out, honestly. But the people who are going to be, oh, you got to do it this way, right? Because that's so frustrating.
Yeah. I mean, it depends what you're writing too. Like the book I've got coming out next, The Paranormal Romance, it's going to be one of 3. And the reason I realized that is when I was almost at the end of the first book, I realized there's so much stuff I haven't even touched on, like massive amounts. So I'm like, okay, well, I'm going to have to write down a couple of brief notes on what's going to be in book 2 and 3, because there's no way I'm going to get it all done in book 1. That's about the limit of the plotting component for me. And in fact, the one time I tried to really plot out a book, it was so disastrous that I threw the book out. It was wasting my time.
Yeah. That's always
so
painful to do, but sometimes necessary.
Yeah. I think you got to write with what you know and what you feel is right for you as an individual. And I don't think any of us do it the same way exactly. Yeah. I had a good friend who's an author, and she plots everything out in great detail and takes a long time to write, but everything's perfect. So every sentence is in the right place. Every paragraph is carefully alluded to. And that's great, but that would do my head in writing like that. So, you got to work with what your strengths are.
Absolutely. And I find that the instinctual kind of like, this goes here, and I can fix it later if I need to, but this goes here for now, and then we'll see if it needs to be moved, that kind of thing, or just removed.
There's lots of post-edit cutting.
Oh boy, yeah.
Yeah.
So in general, though, it sounds like you got basically you don't have like a different process for different genres, which I mean makes sense. I don't know why I even thought about that, but I guess like I know some people will say like they'll plot their short stories and then discover their novels or vice versa. And but I guess I don't know. Do you write any short fiction? I suppose is a question that goes right with that.
I tried to. I've got a couple. I'll be honest. I really struggle with writing short story, and hats off to people that do, because for me, it's just a snapshot of a bigger picture. Mm-hmm. Like it really is like taking a full book and then opening like 3 pages and then just pulling those out.
Yeah, it's like you start the book.
The rest of the book sitting there,
Yeah, but I've heard it described that a short story is kind of like you start the book, like up, like just do the last chapter or the climactic chapter of a novel is kind of how a short story works in some cases, at least with science fiction ones.
Yeah,
and that is pretty crazy to me. I'm like, I don't know about that. I don't know if I'd want to approach a short story that way, and I don't write a whole lot of them either. But
yeah. No, I think it's a good learning experience for being able to edit down, and so learning the concept of making really articulate short sentencing worthwhile. So that's a good way. But again, it's a bit like poetry. You go through phases where you do stuff, and sometimes I'll write poetry, sometimes I'll do short stories, but my primary writing is novel writing. It's my go-to. So.
Yeah, no, I mean, I again, likewise, I feel like there's a lot of parallels. As much as authors have a lot of differences, there's also a lot that we have in common with each other.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah, so I guess I gotta ask one other. Oh, definitely go back, circling back to what we're talking to the comedy side. I'm like, because you like to mix your comedy and your drama sometimes, or sometimes like your romantic comedy probably obviously leans more heavily on the funny side. Yeah. But how do you find? Do you have any tricks for writing humor, or do you analyze jokes or any of that stuff?
So I guess the one thing I've learned about humor through the years is the humor that people radiate the most with is humor that they identify with. So it's commonly occurring things that are ridiculous, and there are a lot of them. There are things that we do in day-to-day life that really are quite crazy, but you don't notice how crazy they are until you read it, and then you're like, yeah, you're right, that's insane. Why would we do it that way? So the fun part, I guess, about writing the comedy element, particularly like rom-coms, is that when you're in that flush of a first romance, you do lots of ridiculous things. You don't even think about it too much. It's like your body takes over and says, yeah, let's throw all reasoning out the window and let's just do this completely random thing because the hormones are going. And so, you can have a lot of fun with that. And I think as a writer, it's important to be able to identify and let other people identify that ridiculousness in themselves as well, because it's kind of fun, It's releasing the pent up energy in the romance a bit,
Yeah,
you
definitely.
Get them into you get them up into the high, and then you do something ridiculous that we've all done as a person, cyber stalking your ex-boyfriend or whatever. We've all been there and done that at some point. So it's about looking at that ridiculous side of it and then feeding that story into the one that you're dealing with, So if you have a interesting relationship where she's keen on a guy, she might cyber stalk him and then find out that he's related to somebody else, and then message the guy that he's related to. And then you get this whole twisted complex of resulting effect, all coming back from a simple thing that we all do that is ridiculous, but it's funny in itself. So that essence of funny. So I think that's why I really enjoy writing as well, is just pointing out some of the ridiculous stuff that we all do as part of my writing technique.
Yeah, and it sounds kind of like also like you're knocking down you got one funny domino and it knocks down more funny dominoes kind of thing, like that example you had there.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And, if we're going to do it like from a sci-fi point of view, Terry Pratchett had a classic example in his works. They're funny because they're relatable. And even though it's sci-fi and it's alternative worlds, it's stuff we do, It's things that we as people look at and can identify with, and that's what makes it funny. So, yeah. It's about recognizing the silliness in all of us and then highlighting that in your writing.
Yeah, absolutely. I really don't know if if my books are very funny. I mean I'm writing like epic fantasy and stuff. It doesn't need to be super funny, but I love humor in fiction and film and all that stuff. But it's I don't think I have a real talent for it. I do spend a lot of time breaking jokes down though. It's kind of weird. Like when I'm talking to people, I'm like, oh yeah, I remember this joke and like this is how that one works. And, go back and forth with my brother or whatever.
But then like if I was looking at that, I'd say that's a great character that you could have included in your books is somebody who looks at everything that people says and tries to break it down into its joke format. That becomes a really interesting.
Yeah, actually, actually, this is one of the things about me that's a character is like sometimes I'll say like, now that's a 3-panel comic strip, basically. That's one of the things I'll comment on a fair amount. Is like if something funny happens, I'm like, oh yeah, this is how this would break down into basically being a 3-panel newspaper comic. Yeah, it's kind of silly stuff. Yeah, so I guess I am just a parody of myself. No,
that's right.
Yeah. Anyway, so you sounds like you're actually not new to writing. You have several books under your belt, but you started relatively recently by some writer standards. This is arbitrary here, but did you were you a big reader before you started writing or any of that stuff?
Yeah, I was. Like as a kid, I was always reading. I think I read most of the classics by the time I was 16. I went through a period of obsessively reading classics, which I think is interesting now because I don't write anything even remotely close to it. In fact, the closest thing I write to it is what my grandma used to call penny horribles. And there's a funny story behind that one. She used to have a whole bunch of penny horribles on her nightside table, and she'd read them all the time. But we weren't allowed to read them because they're inappropriate. And my sister got her a book. It's Polo. Some of you viewers might have read it. Anyway, it's quite raunchy. And she picked it up and she started reading it and she's going, oh, this is terrible. Oh, this is horrible. Well, she read that entire book from front to back. She didn't even bat an eyelid on that one. But it was quite inappropriate, but she read it. So, I think, I've always been an avid reader. I enjoy books. I really enjoy getting into different headspaces, and it's sort of an escapism, I guess, for me. And nowadays, there's such a selection, It's
right.
crazy.
So you still read a lot. That's good. I mean, not all. I mean, I know a lot of my guests and myself included get really, really have a tough time reading enough or reading as much as we used to. Like before I started writing, I would read quite a lot, and then I'm like, I'm writing now. I'd rather write a book, and that's how I went through a few years in my teenage years. Whenever I pick up a book to read it, I would immediately like, oh no, I got to go write my own book. That's what I want to do.
Yeah. I think it's about, like, I read differently than I used to. A lot of my quote-unquote reading at the moment is audiobooks, because, if I'm going to and from places, I'll put an audiobook on. And I've introduced myself to some really great authors through the audiobook process. But yeah, the physical sitting down and reading is sort of like that 10 minutes you grab before bedtime kind of scenario, which unfortunately isn't a full day hanging out doing nothing as a teenager like you used to.
That's a good point. Yeah. Well, have you got anything you've been reading lately, though, or listening to lately that stands out? Anything you'd recommend, I guess?
Uh, Not from a sci-fi perspective.
Oh, it doesn't have to be. Anything will do. Seriously. I didn't prime you for this like I often do with my guests, but I do tend to ask for a reading recommendation if the guest reads it enough.
That's right. Let me open up my current reads list and have a look and see what I'm reading. Helen Harper, I've enjoyed hers. She's actually, I understand she's a self-pub, but she's great. I've loved her stuff. I read Neil Stephenson's Seven Eves.
Okay. Yeah, I've heard of that one.
That was a really good one.
Yeah, okay.
That was definitely worth the read. In fact, my husband's mildly obsessed with it because he started listening in when I started it, and now he keeps coming back to it. So that was a good one to get into. I made the children listen to the Jurassic Park book as opposed to the film, which poked a few beers because they're like, "Oh, hold on, this is nothing like the movie." I'm like, "Well, it kind of is, but it isn't." They're like, "This is way better," and I said, "This is why you read books." Yeah.
It's an improvement. Put it that way.
I read Elena Oliphant is Completely Fine, which is a really funny look at somebody with autism, which sounds really bad, but it is actually quite a funny book.
That's interesting. I'm actually autistic, so it's funny. Maybe I should check that out. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, Elena Oliphant is Completely Fine. It is a very funny read, and as she goes through the concept of trying to work out, she decides she wants to have a relationship, and then she has to work out how to have a relationship. So it's quite
okay. That is kind of a funny predicament. I know that you think now that you mention it.
And I recently just finished Legend by Marie Lu, which was really good as well. That's a fantasy.
Cool. Yeah. Well, thank you. Thanks. That's a lot of good recs. So excellent.
Oh, good. No worries.
It makes up for the fact that I actually don't have. Oh no, I do have one actually. Sorry, I forgot about this. I'm actually not quite finished with this. It's just a novella. But that's how pathetic my reading speed is. But I just recently picked up Maurice Broaddus has this little book called Buffalo Soldier. That's
okay,
and it's kind of steampunk, I think. Honestly, I don't know anything about the book because I didn't read the description, and it's been on my Kindle for a long time. So I know Maurice a little bit from cons I've gone to, and this is really cool. This is like African American kind of steampunk, basically. Or yeah,
cool.
And it's really neat so far, and yeah, nice. And it's also a Western, so right up my alley.
Okay, cool. All right, I might have to check it out.
definitely worth looking at. Yeah, writing style is really good in that one.
Yeah,
and
it makes a difference. Yeah.
It does a huge difference for me, anyway. I mean, I'm a nerd about that kind of thing.
Very cool.
So yeah, VK, thanks for being on the show.
No worries. It was lovely to talk to you today.
It's always good to meet a new guest, a new friend. Well, I hesitate to say friend after 30 minutes, but a new someone, a new introductions,
of course.
All that sort of thing. So thanks for joining the show. Where can people find your work and get your stuff?
The easiest way is probably my website. So www.vktritschler.com.
Wonderful. Thanks for joining the show once again. It's been fun.
No worries.
And as for this podcast, you can find more of us at mentalcellularpublications.com, and that's cellular with a C in case you're new to the show. And that's where you can find all the old episodes, and well, not all the old episodes, but you can find a good chunk of them. In fact, if you as long as you keep scrolling back the timeline, you'll eventually get them all. And you can also find my books on Amazon.com. And, of course, the wide books. My print books are now wide on a bunch of the different online stores. So check those out as well. Thanks for listening, folks. And have a good week.
That tears it.